Awesome. I just started the recording.
Right.
Okay, so you want to start giving details on how you went above and beyond on your last role, but then you're leaving some components of the job without talking about it. Guess what is going to happen? This HR who just called you on the phone will sit and say, "Hey, the hiring manager told me to look for 10 points, but hey, Sean, who is just a character, not saying anybody's Sean. Sean has only two. Okay, I don't think I need to send Sean to the hiring manager because there's still 8 more things that Sean doesn't know how to do. And it's not because Sean doesn't know how to do it, but Sean is taking the phone screening as the proper interview. And instead of for Sean to focus on meeting enough of the points on the JD, he was concentrating or she was concentrating on one particular place where Sean had good level of expertise. So, in summary, your phone screening, it's more high level overview. You should cover more of the JD rather than concentrate on one single point. That way, the HR is super confident that, oh, Sean knows his job. He knows almost everything that they want. I'm going to present Sean to the hiring manager. And I can tell you for a fact, when you tick a lot of boxes on the JD, you will see that the hiring manager starts working for you. And I mean, I've had that experience where the HR rather is calling and giving you tips and say, hey, this is what the hiring manager wants, this is what they like, this is what you should be saying. And it only happens when the HR has come to this level of confidence based on everything that you've said and based on how much of the JD you were able to show that you have expertise in or you have some level of experience in. And moving forward, beyond phone screening, sometimes we have HR initial interviews. This is more of an advanced phone screening. Here, the HR has set of questions that they've written. So from phone screening, it's more of getting to know you and seeing how you align with the job description. But with HR initial interview, this might sometimes be more. And it happens most times with HR who have the domain knowledge. So that means an IT recruiter who knows the IT landscape. They understand different components and different systems. So in their own little way, they're able to ask you advanced questions beyond your knowledge of a tool. They're able to ask you the use of it. They're able to ask you your experience or maybe some sort of technical questions, so to say. So in this position, and that's what I do when I get an interview, I go to check this HR out and see what is their career, what does it look like. I say that, hey, this person worked as a system analyst or they worked as an IT consultant before they move into HR. So under normal condition, I know that I'm speaking to somebody who is knowledgeable. So I should, try to read up. And when I'm speaking with like a really advanced level of understanding. So the HR initial interview could dive deeper, but it will not really be centric on you working in the company. It's more of validating those things that you have on your resume. So again, back to what I said in the beginning about stakeholders and value, that understanding what is of value to that HR in that call is very important. So they don't really care so much about how you're going to do it in the company. And I will explain why they don't really care. Not that they don't care in the outright sense, but they are more about validating that truly everything that you have on your resume, you can do it and you're speaking to it and you have that level of cohesion in explaining those questions that you have, right? And when I say that they don't really care if you can do it, it's because they don't work in the team. Remember, the hiring manager, the HR doesn't work in the team. You're probably not going to report to the HR. So they don't know the day-to-day process. They don't know the day-to-day activities. They don't even know the day-to-day deliverables on that role. So most times they're just speaking to validate what you have on your resume and to see that you align with the job description. Now, I would say the most important person, the hiring manager. This most time is the person that either going to report to this person or the person you will report to is reporting to that person. So there's always a connection from the hiring manager to you. It could be direct or indirect connection within the level of the organization. So the hiring manager, of course, 100% knows what you want to do. They understand what your day-to-day activities are, and they are the one who can really test you to see the alignment between your experience, your education, and the position. And this is a very interesting point that I'm going to spend some time in to educate you how you can navigate different scenarios with the hiring manager. Remember, we said that there is a stakeholder, there is a value. So the question would be, I am having an interview with the hiring manager. Of course, I've seen the JD, which is the same thing that I saw to speak to the HR. How do I really know what is the value to that team? How do I really know what I should be concentrating in when I'm speaking to the hiring manager? And this is a gray area that 60, 70% of people who come to the hiring manager don't know this answer. So, and this is where you have to be smart. So you get into an interview, of course, 90% of the time they're going to give you an overview of what the position is, right? And this also uh comes into play if you are confident going into that interview. So the hiring manager starts and say, "Hey, my name is again Sean. I work for ABC Limited, and I'm the hiring manager for the position of the executive assistant. So right here we have our executive officers who do business with ABC. They give you an overview, and from the overview, you've still not detected exactly why they need you. So the next thing most likely they would ask you is, so before we go into the details of the interview and questioning, do you have any question for me? Please, at this stage, if you still don't understand the value of that position, do not say go on. Politely, you can ask questions like this. Thank you so much. That was a really wonderful walkthrough of this position. However, I'm still not very clear. Can you tell me what exactly are the day-to-day activities of the last person on this role? Or if it's a new role, can you just give me some, overview of what the day-to-day activities of a person who will be in this position if it's a new role? And you might hear things like, okay, I mean, it's not exhaustive, but yeah, the person will do A, the person will do B, and let's go to that role of the executive assistant. So the person, the hiring manager says, so this person would be able to follow our executives to the airport lounge because we have private jets that fly our executives from different part of the world, maybe to Europe or to Africa. So this executive assistant will follow them to the airport and help with all the logistics. And after that, this person will work on their calendars, setting up meetings and all of that. From that answer, you already seen the day-to-day activities. So previously, you saw executive assistant, you saw Microsoft Excel, you saw all of those tools. But now you know that this role is even going to involve somebody who has an idea of traveling, of handling airport duties, which you wouldn't have known before, right? And this is just a microscopic example. Depending on the role that you're interviewing for, it could be an IT role, it could be medical, whatever. But from that answer, you will get an idea of what you should be concentrating on or things that you can add to the answers that you built up prior to the interview to make you more relatable. Remember, all the hiring manager cares about is I want to hire somebody that when that person comes in, the organization will not ask me, why did I interview that person? Why did I hire that person? Because at the end of the day, subconsciously, the hiring manager has this responsibility of putting the right person on the job. So you want to make sure that you tick all of the boxes. So with the hiring manager, there's a lot of background work to do. I personally, I go to their LinkedIn, I search them on Google, I see what they've been doing and what their role has been in the company. Have they been there for a long time? If they've been, what did they change department? All of these beautiful things. But like I said, I'm going to be spending some time here in the hiring manager role. So we have an interview. More likely than not, it's always not one person. I mean, these days you have the hiring manager, you probably have a team lead there, you probably have some other roles, could even be the HR. So how do you navigate these sort of interviews with two, three, four people interviewing you? And like I always say, interviewing is a big deal. And you have to be one, extremely focused, extremely smart to be able to ace these interviews. And I will give you a scenario. So I'm interviewing for this company. It's for the position of an RP analyst, right? It's robotic automation. And I'm getting into this interview first. One thing I will always encourage is feel at home. And by feeling at home, I'm not saying like relax and sit like you don't care, but be at peace with yourself because at the end of the day, what is the worst thing that can happen? They don't give me the job. That's the worst thing that can happen. They won't take my resume. They won't remove my education. They won't take my money. They won't close my bank account. So of course, we might be in a position where we're anxious. We don't have a job for the past few months, but that doesn't help. So be comfortable and understand that the worst that can happen is them not giving you the job. So I always like icebreakers, and I always say another mistake that I pointed out in speaking to people, helping them with interviews is be human. At the end of the day, regardless of the position, be it technology, medical, whatever, beyond the use of tools and technologies, we're still human. And nobody wants to hire somebody that looks, sounds, and behave like a robot. So be human. It's an interview. You don't want to come and look like, okay, what is the question? Let me answer it and I'm gone. So in the beginning, I do things like icebreakers. Hi, good morning. I know that we live in a very hypersensitive world right now, so you also don't want to put yourself in a ditch. So be careful of use of pronouns, pronunciation of names, because you might be wrong. So just be very careful. If you're not super sure of the pronunciation, don't bother calling the name. So you can speak generally. Hi everyone. How's your day? How's the weather? Maybe, oh, maybe it's an interview in Canada, so I'm asking questions like, oh, are you also in Ontario? Oh yeah. So what city? Oh, I'm in Kitchener, Ontario. Oh, how's the weather today? Like, be human. Of course, you don't want to take these 5, 6, 7 minutes of your time. It's just a minute or two. Build that connection with your interviewers, 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. Like, relax the atmosphere. I can tell you for a fact that as you are nervous, they have some level of nervousness too, right? Because they're going to meet somebody they've never seen, never spoke to, never met. So everybody at that point, at that beginning, have some level of nervousness. So be human enough to break the ice. It helps a lot, and it creates that environment of easy conversation, right? But if you just sit there like a robot waiting for them to say, hey, okay, so can you tell me about yourself, right? Break the ice. Even if they're not asking how your day was, most times they would if they're nice people. But if they're not, please feel free to take a minute to break that ice and create an environment where you can have that good conversation. And more likely than not, you will hear things like, thank you so much for showing up for this interview. This is the position of ABC, and we're looking to hire this candidate immediately. And this candidate will report to this person. They give you an overview. And more likely than not, the first question they will ask you is, tell me about yourself. It's almost like a standard question. Tell me about yourself. And one thing that interviewers make a mistake is that question is not about yourself. That question is 30% about you, 30% about the company, 30% about the job description, and 10% about your career plans. Again, 30% about yourself, 30% about the company, 30% about the position, and 10% about your career plans. And why do I say that? They don't care about you, and that's very honest. Remember, you're not the only one interviewing. They don't care about you of you being you. So I've seen a lot of mistakes where people take this time to talk extensively about their qualities, extensively about their background. Oh, I'm from Nigeria. I had my education in Nigeria, and I even went through somebody's interview note, and the person said, "I'm from a family of five." Nobody cares about family of five. That's not why we're here, and the company doesn't care how many members of the family you came from. So what should you be focusing on? Like I said, it's 30% about you, 30% about the company, 30% about the role, and 10% about your career plans. So you are answering this question from the position that this is who I am. I know your company does this, and I can offer this based on this role, and this is what I see for the future. So let me make a mock answer to that so that it's more relatable. Again, this is just an example. If I was preparing for an interview, I would do a lot of due diligence, understand what the company is, understand what they do, what their product is, who are their customers, who are their competitors, how long they've been in the market, and what I think would be of value to that company. So I'm interviewing for the role of a senior manager, or let's say branch manager for KFC. That's what I'm interviewing for. And they're asking me, tell me about yourself. So, and this has to be a really short answer. It's not 5 minutes, 6 minutes long essay. I will say, thank you so much for that question. I usually talk about my name and where I'm from. My name is Femi. I'm originally from Nigeria. I had my first degree in accounting and finance and a master's in international business in Europe. I've had the opportunity to manage several teams because, again, it's a managerial position. So I believe that your resume should have spoken about some managerial roles. That's why you're here. That's why they invited you. So I had the opportunity to manage several teams from the health and wellness, from travels and tourism, and I've had the opportunity to work in overseas countries, managing well over 20 teams. And one of the big highlights of my career is managing teams in an extremely volatile and customer-centric positions because I know that KFC is a position whereby the staffs are going to be interfacing with a lot of customers coming in and coming out. So I am trying to build a background that I have that experience managing people who are within that context, right? Now, I've spoken about myself, my education. I'm already in the view of the company, right? Speaking to what makes sense to the company because of the same environment. Now I'm talking about the role. And with over 7 years of managerial experience, I've been able to manage different teams and increase organization's profit and operation efficiency for the past 7 years. And as I'm looking to advance in my managerial career, I'm looking for an organization where I can have impact on customers as well as enable the organization to grow. Again, that's a really pretty generic answer. But within the context of my answer, I have talked about myself a little bit, which covers me, where I'm from, my education, and I've gone to the company in relatable fashion that I've had an experience working as a manager where I'm managing people who are customer facing. And I've come to the role again. It's going to be managing a team. How do you do that? Encouraging people and helping the organization to make more money the broader way. And I'm also finishing it off with my career plans that I want to be part of a company or I want to be in a managerial position where I'm managing people who are facing the customer, because you could be in a manager position that is more of back-end management, whereby nobody sees you, nobody hears anything, you're just planning the whole thing behind the scene. But within the context of that position, I want to say things that are very relatable, things that makes sense to the organization, so to say. Because if I'm managing from backend where nobody sees me, we don't have any customer facing staff, it's different because the kind of problems you will see in such position is different from what you will see. So, for example, if you were the manager of a logistic company, shipping is being done, customer service is offered online, you don't have any customer facing issue. But if you're managing KFC or McDonald's, for example, you will see customers who are drunk come in, you will see situations whereby somebody doesn't come to work at last minute. So all of this context is different. And when the hiring manager is looking to fill somebody in that position, they want somebody who has very relatable experience. And that's why I always say we do a lot of background work to understand what exactly that position is looking for. And that's because interviewing is not a joke and it's something that takes preparation. And within the context of the hiring manager, again, I'm still there. Another thing that is very important is the fact that you have to own the interview. And when I mean own the interview is be there, right there. So a lot of people are anxious or you've been looking for a job for a while, but when you get into the interview session, you're not there. And when I mean you're not there, is whatever they're saying, you're not keeping it, you're not storing it, you're not processing it. And I will give you an example. Again, I was interviewing for an assistant manager role for robotic process automation. And the conversation was good. They asked me a real lot of tech questions. After 1 hour, nice conversation, they asked, so Femi, do you have any question for the team? And then I said, um, just to be sure, this is the position of an assistant manager, robotic process automation, but you've not really asked me any question relating to this domain. Are we getting there, or is there any reason why you didn't ask me this question? And then the hiring manager said, oh, apologies. Would you like to share some experience? I said, yes, I've done this. I have knowledge of this technology. I have this certification. So the question is, a lot of people say, I'm frustrated. I had this interview, it was a nice conversation, everything was good, they smiled, I smiled, everybody was happy, but still I got the rejection. It's because sometimes happy interviews, interesting interviews doesn't land us the job because we have not done justice on pitching how we are a fit for the role. We've allowed the nice conversation to derail the interview. And by derailing, what I mean is when there is an interview, the hiring manager and whoever is in that session, they've probably written some couple of things down on what we should be discussing. But because it's a human to human conversation, things can derail. And when they derail, they don't have the opportunity to come back to some certain questions. So what is going to happen? What is going to happen is that you will be assessed on the relatable answers that you gave to the items on the menu. So let's say there are 10 items there, you've given answers to 4. But because the conversation went amiss, you started talking about other things, right? You derailed, they didn't have the chance to ask you the remaining 5. So at the end of the day, you've had a really wonderful interview with all smiles. Another person comes in, and the person is smart enough to understand that whenever they are in an interview, they should always maintain the interview back to its purpose. The person was able to realign all the conversations and they were able to ask all the questions. So the thing is, you've scored a 0 in 4 questions there, but the other person is going to have at least something because they were able to say to those points. So how do you do that as an interviewer going into an interview to make sure that when you're there, you kind of control the conversation, and when you see that it's being derailed from things that really you will know that, like while we're talking about this, you should be smart enough to bring the conversation back. So for example, I'm interviewing for the position of an assistant manager, digitalization and automation, and we've been answering different questions, and all of a sudden they get to the point that maybe I mentioned something that I worked in a particular location, and then the hiring manager I say, oh, just really nice that you've worked in Europe. So actually, I think that we also have some customers in Europe and blah 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 blah. So the question now is like, oh, can you tell me your experience of what it was like working in Europe? So intelligently, I'm already seeing that that question emanated from a subset of my answer. So it wasn't like they wrote it in the question before to ask me about my job experience in Europe, right? So I'm thinking in my head, how can I bring this conversation back to where I want it to be? Because this job is in Canada and this is where I will be working. So thank you so much for that question. You're very right. I had 3 years experience working in a tech company in Europe, and I would say that one of the highlights of that career is being able to work with international customers. In that role, I had the opportunity of working with clients within the North American region, which is Canada and US. What I'm doing is saying, hey, bro, hey, sis, please leave this place. I know that we went there because I told you in my experience I worked in Europe. Let's come back to where we are. So I have to be smart enough to redirect that conversation back where we are, because if that conversation lasts 15, 20, 30 minutes, they wouldn't ask me what they have in their list. And at the end of the day, I get assessed based on the answers that I gave. And even though I was a wonderful candidate, but they didn't really ask me the questions that they wanted to ask. And I'm sure that you know that people respect time here. So even when it's an hour and they have two, three, four questions to ask you, they probably just skip it and tell you, what question do you have for us? And they'll try to end the conversation. So that is an example, but it could come in different ways. It could be derailing on a role. It could be derailing on even your on the job description. But you have to be smart enough to bring back that conversation, right? So in that interview that I was sharing that I had an experience with, and I'm asking them, hey, we've spoken a lot, but we've not even spoken about the domain that I'm going to be working in. You've not asked me what are the RPA tools, and by RPA I mean robotic process automation, that I know. You've not asked me my experience in that domain. So like, if I'm going to be employed as an assistant manager on this role, you need to know what I know about it. And with that question, so that was the like end of the interview, asking me, do I have any question? But because I was listening and I understand that they've not touched this aspect, as I was able to bring that in. Generically, people would just say, "Oh, can you tell me if you offer training for your new employees? And what is the what? How do you undo work-life balance for your employees?" These are good questions, but I never ask such questions. Never. And I will tell you for a fact, if you listen to your interview, if you are in your interview, those are not the questions you will ask, because there will be a lot of things that was mentioned in the interview that would really need to be asked. But when you're not listening and you kind of, when you're hearing someone but you're not listening, you can hear what they're saying but you're not processing it. That's when you ask such generic questions. But if you listen and you're in that moment, you will have lots of questions that are very relatable based on the conversation that you just had. Another thing within the region of hiring manager, which again, like I said, could be more than one person, is understanding each person's role in the interview. Remember, these people are working in the organization, right? They have their daily role. So maybe we have an hiring manager who is a product manager, and then we have the head of IT, and then the third person is maybe team lead of a particular position. They didn't just come to the interview because they're jobless. They didn't just come to that interview because they don't have what they're doing. So everybody in that interview has a role and have a purpose for why they're in that session. And as interviewers, you have to be extremely smart to the point that please make sure that none of these people is quiet. I do that a lot. And by making sure that none of them is quiet, it's not you pinging or calling them out. No, you have to do it as a smart interviewer. So let's create this scenario. We have an hiring manager who is the project manager. We have the head of IT there, and you have a developer in that interview, right? They probably brought the developer not to ask you questions, but they brought the developer to also make an assessment that, hey, we're employing a senior business system analyst who's going to be working with you. to develop applications, right? So we want you to be there and give us feedback based on what the person is saying, and if you think that person is nice to work with, right? So that developer is asking no question. It's just an interview, smiling and giggling. And at some point, they ask me a question. Can you tell me your experience working with difficult stakeholders? Right? It's a scenario question. It has no bearing on development. It has no bearing on who the developer is. But being a smart person, understanding that we've gone 20, 25 minutes, and this guy is in this interview, he's not saying anything. How do I drag him into this conversation? Because when I leave here, he's going to make his own comments. And if I don't leave an impression on him, he most likely will make a very general impression and assessment of me. So this is my answer. And thank you so much for that question. Over the course of my career as a business analyst, one of the most occurring things is difficult stakeholders. And this could happen in different contexts and in different situations. But relatively, in my last role working with RBC, I didn't work with RBC. In my last role working with RBC, we had a situation whereby the business didn't understand some certain functionalities, and that led to a little bit of confusion in the requirement. And the developer see me what I'm doing, and the developer didn't understand how to tackle this. So as a senior business analyst, I had to create a chat session, and for those who are not in BA, it's just application development. So I had to create a chat session where I had the developers or the development team and the business team, and we discussed at length on the entire functionalities of these applications, spelling the requirement in tiny details and adding additional details for the developer to understand exactly what the business wanted as functionalities in the application. What am I doing? That's not the only scenario I have working with difficult people. That's not the only scenario I have working with difficult, but I want that developer to come into my conversation. Don't keep quiet, right? Don't keep quiet. All I'm trying to do with my answer is killing two birds with just one stone. So I want to answer the question, giving them a scenario of a situation where the stakeholders were being difficult, they didn't accept what we were building. And I also wanted to drag that developer into our conversation. Because guess what? All the questions they were asking me might not be relatable to the developer, might not make any sense to the developer. But right now, I've just brought in the developer into a scenario that more likely than not, developer has experienced this kind of situation. And I can tell you for a fact, at the end of the assessment, the developer will have things to say other than if I kept him out of the conversation 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes, the interview is gone. And at the end of the day, thank you so much, Femi. We really enjoyed your conversation. We will get back to you next week. And when the camera goes off, this is what usually happens. Sean, what do you think about Femi? I think he's knowledgeable. He has the experience, but I don't think he's working in a development environment. And why is he saying that? Because maybe there weren't any questions that related to that area that I had to talk about being in a dev environment and working with developers, right? But it's not your fault. There was no question about it. But if we are smart enough and understanding that, hey, everybody in this interview has to feel me. Everybody in this interview has to know what I have to offer that is representative of what their own work is in the organization. And this could be in several contexts. I've just described it from having a BA interview with a developer on the role. It could be whatever role, cyber security, and you have there your hiring manager, which is maybe head of IT security, and you have another person who is head of the business line that you want to work with. That person cannot be quiet. They cannot be. But again, we can't tell them that, sorry, you've been quiet. Don't you have any question for me? No, that's a rather um I don't know what word to use. That's not the approach. You will bring them into the conversation with answers, with scenarios that is used to answer your questions, but it is going to be inviting, right? And also, I had that experience one day that I had a developer in an interview, and he also wasn't talking. And then he asked me, "Can you tell me your experience on documenting requirements?" Which is primarily our role as business analysts. We speak to stakeholders and gather requirements. Like, can you tell me your experience gathering requirements? It's a question that has very little um, exposure to life of a dev. But I'm saying, I thank you so much. I like to say thank you so much for the question. Just again to sound polite. Thank you so much for the question. So as a senior business analyst, I've had experience of gathering requirements through several methods. I've used focus group interviews, I've used surveys, I've used um, brainstorming, I've used observation session. But above all, beyond gathering requirement, I think the most important thing is to ensure that the requirement has enough level of details for the developer to work with. Again, apologies that I'm focusing on answering it in a BA platform. And I said, beyond gathering this requirement, I make sure that I attach an additional documentation which we call the data dictionary, that explains the definitions of different terminologies within the context of my documentation. And this is to enable the developers have the very good level of understanding of what each terminology means within the requirement. And guess what? The developer in that interview honestly said, I would like to work with you. That question didn't bother about the developer. That question didn't need me to push to that extent. But because I am in this interview, and again, like I said, I've been explaining, seeing that there's a developer there, there's a reason why they brought that developer. And he's been quiet. He's not asking me any question. So I've used that question and found a way to bring that developer into the conversation. That was what he said in the interview. I would like to work with you. Just because I said, beyond gathering my requirements and documenting it, I attach a data dictionary that would enable the developer. Everybody wants their life to be easy because in our world of development and system configurations and integrations, blah, 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 the developer will, life will be easy for the developer if they have enough amount of details. So when a BA is sitting in an interview having that mindset that, hey, I'm here to gather the requirements rightly, and beyond that, I'm going to give you enough details to work with. It just automatically appeals to that developer. And beyond that interview, when they're having their assessment, I can tell you for a fact that the developer will rate you so high, not because you've shown evidence of several documentation that you've done or you've worked in big companies, but just because you've involved that particular person in the interview and how your work relates to that person. So beyond dev conversations or IT conversations, if you find yourself in other interviews in other domains, be smart enough to have this understanding that when everybody in the interview needs to be involved in the conversation. Whatever I'm saying, I need to bring them in. They can't be quiet. They can't just sit idle. So it's a really smart thing to do, but you can only do that when you're listening and when you are attentive as well. Another thing that I will touch before moving on to next on this role is that you also have to pay attention. When I mean pay attention, sometimes we get asked questions in interviews. We have so much to say. You could go 20 minutes talking about it, but how do you know when it's time to keep quiet? How do you know when it's time to round off on your answer, right? Because you have so much to say. You have 10 years of experience. So there's lots of scenarios, a lot of issues that you could talk about. Like your heart, your brain is bubbling because there's so many things to talk about. How do you know at what point to stop talking? And that's why you have to be smart enough to read your interviewers. If it's one-on-one, which is like live interview, or if it's online, you should see beyond their look and see when they are trying to do something else. And that's when you should round up. So what do I mean? Tell me about yourself, which like I said, like why would you talk for 3 minutes? Or tell me a situation where you handled where you went above and beyond, for example. And you've done that many times in your career and you have so many scenarios to talk about. And you talk about scenario one, scenario two, and suddenly you see that your interviewers are flip, flipping their paper, touching the pen, or trying to do something not so relatable. You already know that you're talking too much. And the next thing is you should round up in 10 seconds after such such gestures. So because we there's something we call the law of diminishing return for those who have exposures to economics. And that is the point where when you're adding more things to a base, but the value that it generates keeps reducing. So in a more relatable example is when you're eating. So you're hungry, you step into KFC or whatever restaurant and you're eating, took the first bowl of food. That first bowl has high utility. You're getting so satisfied. But by the time you take the second bowl, it's already tiring. When you're trying to take the third one, you're basically forcing it and it's giving you no value. That's exactly what conversations look like. So when I ask you a question, please tell me how you did this. So when you start by explaining yourself, I am actively listening and processing. But if it's getting too much, I'm basically not listening anymore. I can hear you speak, but I'm not processing anything. So at that point, whatever you're saying is just time wasting. I'm not processing anymore because I just need to know that you've had this experience. So 1, 2 is fine. You get into the third example, the fourth example, you should know when to round up your explanation. And if you don't, as a person, have that interview skills to sum up your answers in such a way that it's short and it still portrays your level of understanding, right? Read the gesture, read the mood, and read the body language. And that would help you to understand that, hey, I'm talking too much. I should just round up, right? So that's another thing to watch out for. And moving on, sometimes you could get your offer letter from the hiring manager, or they'll tell you that, okay, thank you so much for interviewing. We'll get back to you. And in 2 days later, you see, we're happy to move to the next stage. And the next stage is going to be with the senior executive, maybe the director or the AVP or the vice president. This is happening very often these days. And you start to ask yourself a question. I've spoken to hiring manager, I've spoken to people who I think that they know what I'm going to be doing. Why do I need to speak to the senior manager or AVP or all these IR positions? So remember, we started this interview session, this interview prep session with stakeholder and value. Now you have to ask yourself again, what is of value to the IR managers? What is of value to senior executives? They don't really care about our day-to-day activities in itself. So if I'm um being I'm being interviewed for a manager for McDonald's, I've had an interview with a senior manager or manager within that city, and now they're asking me to interview with a VP, like that's vice president McDonald's, who controls the entire outlet. And of course, McDonald's are like franchise, whatever. But let's say they own all the McDonald's in Calgary, for example, which is a city in Canada. So I'm speaking with this person who is vice president, and the person controls Calgary, Edmonton, and some other big cities around. At that point, that person is not too much interested in my tiny day-to-day activities. Rather, that person from the level in the organization cares more about how I feel my position would help the organization in the higher scale. So in business analysis, we have something we call horizon, and it's all in every organization. So we have like strategic horizon, we have initiative and delivery. And just to make it make sense to you, so the strategic is the boss. They make the bigger decision. Where do we diversify? Who do we partner with? That's the strategy level. And in every organization, we have this. We have the initiative. Those who take that decision that has been made by the strategic level and process it and define ways to actualize it. So saying, oh, we want to enter a new market. So the strategic people have, or the strategic executive have made a decision that we want to take our company to Africa. That is their decision, expansion. And then the initiative is saying, okay, how do we do it? Okay, let's start with Kenya and Uganda. And then we're going to open in Nairobi and I don't know what city is in Uganda. Those they made the decision. And then the delivery, right? Those people who are going to action it, those people are made up of those who hire and who dictate the operation of the organization. So now, when we are meeting with somebody on that bigger level of making a decision to expand to Africa, they don't really care about the tiny bit of work that we do, but they care so much about how that tiny bit of work influences the organization on the larger scale, on making the bigger decision, right? So when they are asking us questions, or when they are giving us scenario questions, what should we be concentrating on? You should now have the mindset that, hey, this person is the AVP. They don't care on who makes the burger rightly. They don't care, but they care so much about profitability, brand name, customer satisfaction, right? Because those are the key performance indicators that would make sense to such person in that position. So when you're interviewing with higher level, I don't want to consider so much of business analyst because I believe that it's not just business analysts that we have in this session, but I'm forced to always go there because that's my domain. That's where I live. That's where I work. That's where I found joy in. But when we're in that kind of interview as business analysts, talking to AVP or VP, they care about how each project that we handle successfully contribute to the success of the organization. So they want to know that you have an awareness that those tiny bits of work that you do have implications to the top, have implications to the decision making, have implications to the long-term sustenance of the organization, have implications to the profitability of the organization. So we have to show our level of knowledge and understanding that, hey, this tiny bit of work affects the profitability. Let me create a scenario that makes it more relatable to us. I'm in an interview with the assistant vice president, and I think I had one interview with the company is Aston Stroke. It's an NGO, and I was speaking with the senior vice president, and they were asking me, "Can you tell me how you will use your expertise in working in the team to ensure that we arrive at this goal?" And I wish I could tell you what they were trying to do, but just for privacy sake, I wouldn't dive into details. So I'm saying, thank you so much for the question. I say, as a business analyst handling different projects, I have the knowledge and understanding that these projects have come from strategic decisions that is aimed at fostering the organization goals. And beyond managing the project, I ensure that we are always in time and within budget to ensure that each project that we work on stays within the timeline and the budget that has been allocated for this project. What am I doing there? That person doesn't care about the documentation that I'm creating. He doesn't care how structured my BRD is because he's not the one who consumes my BRD. And for those in not the business analysis BRD, business requirements document where we write the things that people who are building applications want. That person doesn't really care about my data dictionary. That person doesn't care about those tiny details. But they want to know my level of understanding that when I'm working in a project, I don't say, oh, this thing is difficult. We'll do it on Monday. But I have an awareness that we need to finish it today so that this project can finish within the timeline and within the budget. Remember who sets the budget? The strategic people. They are the one who made the decision. They're the one who. So the strategic people don't set the budget, but they set the project. And the initiative, the middle senior managers will set the budget, but would align with the senior executive to say, okay, we're putting $1 million for this, and is it okay to use $1 million for this, right? So being brilliant enough to understand how that my work influences the top management is how you can get that yes from those level of interviews. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I had my first interview with HR, I had with the hiring manager, but anytime I get to the AVP level or the VP level, I don't get the job. They tell me that even though I was a good candidate, but they've gone with somebody else." It's because everything that you were telling to the VP or to the AVP were things you were supposed to speak to the hiring manager, which you did already. That's what got you here. So you have to have that level of understanding that things make sense to different people depending on their positions in an organization. And we as interviewers have to be smart enough to understand how to answer questions in such a way that those people see the value that you bring to the position. And moving on, so sometimes after that, they'll still tell you that, oh, we would like you to meet the team and see if you're a fit for the team. I had somebody who got to this interview, and after that, they sent a letter that we're sorry, but we're going with somebody else. And he was a little bit pissed that after 4 or 5 rounds of interview, and only they didn't pick me because I went for team fit. I was like, oh wow, what did you do there? That was really nice conversation. No, I told them what I could do. I told them my expertise in this. I told them that I worked in this company. I'm like, okay. So when we get to a team fit interview, it's a moment to be lying, really. I don't see why organizations do it, but I'm like, that's not the point where you want to show that you are the god of everything. Remember, naturally, human are conservative of their position. Human are conservative of their environment. When they see somebody who knows more than them, the average human tends to be protective. And that is the truth. When I see that, hey, I'm the king of this organization, nobody does anything until they ask me. And now they've brought Sean. And Sean is saying, I know this, I know that, I can do this, I've had this experience, I was the manager in this organization, I led this initiative. People just automatically start being protective. So when you get to a team fit interview, listen more. I was like, like it's not a point where you want to show your the level of expertise should have been shown to the hiring manager, should be shown to the AVP or the VP. But when you come to that team, all we want to do is to show that, hey, I'm a person who listens, I'm a person who receives ideas, I'm a person who likes to collaborate. You don't want to appear to that person who what is the word? Who who is sunk in their own opinion. So I've also had the opportunity to participant enable closed captioning. Okay, so I've also had the opportunity to be in such interviews. So when I get there and about 5, 6 person, they will welcome you. Hi, Femi, welcome. How are you doing today? I'm fine. How are you as well? Again, feel free to be human. Beyond whatever you're doing in the company, your humanness is very important. So they're telling me, so this is our coffee room. This is where we do this. This is where we do that. These are our daily activities. Blah blah blah. Oh, interesting. All I do is validate what they're saying. Oh, that's interesting. And if I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to ask them questions, I don't ask them difficult questions. Again, not to make them see me as somebody who's going to bring problem to them. I need to make them see me as someone that they are looking forward to work with. So I'm asking these questions like, oh, that's really interesting. You said you've been here for 3 years. Oh, what is it like working here? And trust me, those are the kind of questions that they want to talk about. Like it's a story. You work here for 3 years, different things have been happening. I say, what is it like working here? Oh, it's very interesting. Keep the conversation interesting. No bizarre questions. No questions to throw anybody off. That's not what you want to do. And that's not the time, again, like I said, to show your extreme expertise. The team fit is not assessing really what you can do. It's more of how can you work with us. Because the truth is, you probably don't know 60% about the organization. So they know that they will have to teach you some things, they would have to explain some things to you. So don't be the super knowing person and make the team get to the point where they feel they need to protect themselves against a new intruder who is going to take them off their job or make them jobless. So in the team feed, please feel free to be human and relate to them and get that level of confidence in them and ease that, hey, Femi is somebody who we can work with. He listens, he's polite and all of that. That's really what matters in that place. But like I said, it's all a lie. You could be the most rude human and get there and be quiet. And 2 days when you start your work, you start fighting everybody. But I mean, don't be that person, by the way. So those are the different stages of the interviews, from phone screening, HR, and senior executive team feed. So I've most of, like I said, I wouldn't be reading from the slide. I've touched this point. Who is my interviewer? So what is the role? What is their job title? What is the level of experience? Knowing this would allow you to prepare way ahead, so you know what kind of questions should you expect? Like I'm saying, when I have a interview with an HR, I go to their profile and see, do they have any IT background? Have they worked in IT roles before? Just so that I know that this person has this level of expertise, and I should be expecting questions that might be looking like IT intrinsic questions rather than basic HR questions. So knowing who the interviewer is, and LinkedIn is really good if the person has an updated profile. Not always do they have that, but if you have it, it's good for you. You get to understand their career journey, and you would understand what really makes sense to them. So, for example, you're interviewing with let's say a VP, and then you look at their LinkedIn, you see that they started as project manager and they were senior in project coordination. Nobody needs to tell us at that point that this person will be so keen on project management. And whenever I mean project management is documentation, timeline, making sure that things are in sync. That person's life or career has been in that line. So naturally, no matter what position they find themselves, they will be so concerned about deadlines and targets and schedules and resources. So when you get to speak to that person, you already know the career progression of that person, and you can speak in a relatable way that the person feels comfortable in your expertise, even though you might not be doing project management responsibilities in that your position, but just understanding that that person has that experience. When you speak in a relatable fashion, so it's a medical position. Let me give you an example. But your chief medical officer had 7 years of project management experience before they transitioned into medical, and then they go to that position. And they're asking you questions like, uh, tell me your day-to-day activities. Even though in the medical position, day-to-day activities involve checking the patient, understanding how the patient is doing, administering the prescription, putting down notes. I'm going above and beyond to say that in the beginning of my day, I ensure that I have planned my day accordingly. I have all the time set. Like, why did you bring planning into that frame of discussion? Because you know that, hey, this person has background in project management. So planning is something that this person would naturally be inclined to, right? In the medical field, it's like, do we really care about your planning? Maybe not so much, right? But that person has a career journey of planning. So I know subconsciously they will tend to like somebody who plans things ahead, because that's who they were. So I'm just bringing into the mix that, hey, so in the beginning of the day, I ensure that I plan it accurately. I put all the times, and I set alarms on my Apple Watch. Feel free to show examples. I set alarms on my Apple Watch on each time I should be with the different patient. And by doing this, I ensure that I spend the right amount of time administering the prescriptions with the right patient. And with this work ethics, I've ensured that most times at the end of my shift, I've covered all the patients that I should attend to. Right? You've killed two birds with one stone. You've shown how you will do the job, but with the knowledge of the fact that that person will like planning and organizing things and making sure that things are the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, you've brought it into that conversation. And those are the tiny bits that gets us the job. Right? I applied for a job on LinkedIn and I was showing my friend that it's like 1,020 applicants. I was like, oh, how are you even going to get? How even if they call you for interview, there's probably like 30 people that are interviewing. I got the offer letter. And it's not because I'm the best in that position, but these tiny bits of details that we pitch in our interview is what sets us aside from everyone else. You're not the best in Excel. You're not the best in Microsoft Word. You're not the best in IT technologies, IT infrastructure. But those tiny bits of details that we can cover and that we can pitch in our discussion is what sets us aside, right? So feel free to investigate. And sometimes, so see, let me expose myself. So when I see that I'm interviewing with somebody, I don't want that person seeing me that I'm checking their LinkedIn. I will just call my friend. Hey, please, can you help me check this person's LinkedIn? Please, the person doesn't feel it awkward that friend me is reviewing my LinkedIn profile. So I wouldn't even check myself. I'll ask a friend, and the friend shares their screen, or maybe I'm right beside the friend, and then we're looking at the person's profile. So the person doesn't see like, oh, why is this guy? Because believe me, some people could feel some sort of ways that they are interviewing tomorrow and then they see that you're viewing their profile. They might look like, why is this guy investigating me? So I don't do it with my profile. I will ask a friend to search the name and I will view all the details that I need to see. At least they don't start to investigate who is this person, how did this person know me. Anybody can look at your profile, but as long as it's not me, you don't get to see that I'm the one doing that. So please, it helps a lot when you have the right information about who the interviewer is and you can speak languages that they understand and make sense to them. And it's a natural phenomenon that as humans, um, I did this, it wasn't a study that I did myself, but I was in an interview seminar like this, and I asked somebody that, hey, I'm Italian. So I'm on a vacation in Uganda, and we're in this large gathering, and somebody just speaks Italian. I said, even if the person is not talking to me, do you know what I do? I look back. Like immediately, just hearing my language, I want to see who is that person who is speaking Italian in Uganda. The person wasn't speaking to me. What they said wasn't about me, but just because it's a relatable language, I want to see what that person is saying, and that's how conversations are. When you can speak a person's language, they naturally are interested in you. That is the truth. They are naturally interested in you. And that study really exposed me to how to really do interviews. So beyond you showing the job, know that person and understand what makes sense to that person. And when we say language, we're not saying the vocabulary in itself, like Italiano, Russian, or Paruski. What we say about language is the context of the position, the context of that person. So you're in medical field, you're in IT, you have to speak that person's language. The hiring manager, the AVP, whoever is talking to you, you have to at least try. It's not always easy, but make sure it's something that you have an awareness of, that you're not just coming to speak yourself, you're coming to speak yourself that that person understands you. So feel free to dive in and understand who that person is, what their experience is, what their job title is, how long they've been in the organization. That matters a lot. If it's somebody who's been in the organization for 6 months, they knew as well. So you also don't want to throw that person off by asking questions that somebody who the only person that can answer that question is somebody who's there for 10 years. So I've done my background. I've seen that my hiring manager just started work 3 months ago. I don't want my question to be, can you tell me what the work culture of this company is? Probably they don't know, right? They just feel awkward, right? So I'm asking that for a person who gets to this company as a new employee, what do you think they should be focusing on? See, two questions. As a new employee, what should I be focusing on? Because this person is also a new employee and is probably experiencing some set of problems relatable to what I'm saying. So you say, oh, that's a really good question. Why is it a good question? Because I know that this person is on this role only 3 months or 4 months. So that person is within the context of what I'm asking. And they will be very excited to share because that's the transitioning that they are going through. And even though you might not have answered question 3, 4, and 5 correctly, but just bringing that person to a place of comfort to share. Probably no senior manager has asked them how they are doing, or nobody has really like intentionally asked them how they are transitioning. But having that question with you is one, showing you've done your background work and that you are even caring about how you will transition when you get the job. It's more of saying, I already have the job. That question is forcing that person to give you the job in some ways. So say, oh, that's a really interesting question. I would say, based on my time here, one of the easy way to transition is that we have our documentations in SharePoint. And one thing that I can encourage for anybody who gets this job is to spend some time in understanding this documentation, understanding the organization, and understanding our processes so that you would be able to do your job faster. And I'm saying, oh, that's really wonderful. I really look forward to doing this, right? But you got to that question or you got to that understanding because you knew that that person is only 4 months in the company. But if it's in the other way, this person has been here 18 years. I'm going to be asking questions that would force that person to tell me something. So I wanted to ask something. Now, based on your time in this company, what would you say has been the organization culture changes, or what would you say is how the organization is adapting to changes in maybe IT world or general work culture? This has been a long time ago. They probably have so many stories to tell you. I wouldn't have asked somebody who was there 4 months ago, 4 months period. So this person said, "Oh, that's a really interesting question. We've gone through several phases. At first, we were owned by Guinness, and then we joined Rogers, and after that, we got bought over by that person has so much experience. It's been 18 years, so there's a lot of things to talk. I'm taking that person to a familiar field to tell me they are, even though generally I don't care how long the organization has been existing, I don't care the organization culture. I just want to work and earn money, right? That's primary primary attitude. But that's not what you want to show to the interviewer. But that person will be in a place of comfort to share so many experience. And like I said, you are as humans, you are naturally inclined to somebody who you have that very easy conversation with. And that helps a lot by knowing who the interviewer is, their experience, their title, and any details, right? So on this slide, we say, what should I focus on as an interviewer? And I'm just going to rush through this because I've basically discussed at length on items that are here. What is the title of the role? What is the job level? I might spend some time here because in my experience coaching people for interviews, I see that a lot of people don't even understand how the job level impacts their getting the job. So if we are interviewing for a managerial role, 100%, when you start talking about your experience, it should be more of you managing. A person lost a job and then he called me, oh, I didn't get a job. I was like, oh, what were the questions they asked? And how did you navigate the interview? He said there was a question that they asked that, how do you ensure that your documentations are right? Like that your documentations are correct, that your documentations are done rightly. And he said that he pays attention to details, and after that, he or she reviews with his manager. Hmm. They're employing you for a manager business system analysis. And you're telling the hiring manager now that even on your last job, you are still showing your documentations to another manager. You've successfully shown that you are not in a position where an organization has trusted your output, right? An organization, even though, and organizations differ. You might have an assistant manager role, and an organization has a manager who is still very interested in your output. And there are organizations where you are not even a manager role, but nobody checks your work. Basically, what you produce is what the organization uses. So when you get to interview in a managerial level, you don't want to show that you are in that level career-wise, that everything you do is being reviewed, everything you are doing has to be checked by another person before the organization makes use of it, because it just shows you're not in the level to be given a manager position. Like, you are still somebody whose work is being checked, you're still somebody whose work is being reviewed. So how would I give you a manager position where you decide things, where you are the one who dictates the direction that the organization would go in your own microscopic environment? So even if you're transitioning from one role to the other and you're lucky enough to get that interview for a senior role, you don't have to say things that makes you look like you are still being fed, because no person would give you the job when they know that you are under supervision, or you've not gotten to the point where organizations have trusted your output. So, what is the relatable question that I can give to you? Somebody, a question asked that, tell me, can you tell me your experience in generating documentation for your development team? I said, thank you so much for that question. As a senior business analyst in my previous role, I've had this experience and level of liberty to create documentations that the development use directly, and it's my job to ensure that things are done rightly, taking into the organization governance rules, to ensure that whatever documentation that I'm producing is at the right level of details and standard before it's being consumed. That being said, I don't have an immediate manager to review my output, so I ensure that I pay attention to details and I review my work myself to ensure that whatever I'm putting out, it's of the highest level of quality. And what I'm trying to show that person is, an organization, or the organization that I am right now, they trust my work. Nobody's double checking anything. So when I get to managerial role, which is me now checking other people's work, I am at a level career wise. I'm a level career that I can supervise, because I've been producing this level of quality. And when I supervise other people, I know what to check out for, I know what to look out for, and I know how to ensure that the quality is maintained. So, and this is just you understanding what is the level of this role. So if you were interviewing for a junior role, you don't want to be saying, "Oh, you control this." You, when you're interviewing for a junior role, you'll be concentrating more on how you work with senior leadership, how you listened, how you carried out instructions, because it's a junior role. That's what they're interviewing you for. So they want to know your experience working with senior managers. What do they expect of you? How did you engage them? How do you ensure that you don't move in your direction and misalign with organization rules? So if it was a junior role, I'm saying some things like, I ensure that I keep a close conversation with my senior managers to understand what the organization rules and procedures are in delivering my own output, right? Because it's a junior role. That's what they expect of me, that I should be that person who is not sunk up in their own abilities, but they know that there are organization rules and governance that has to be respected. And that's why I'm showing that in the interview. But I'm only able to know if I have digressed and I understand that this role is a junior role and I'll be reporting to a line manager, right? And if it's senior executive, you're interviewing for AVP, director, these people don't care about the task itself. They care about the bigger, controlling a whole chapter, controlling an entire province, right? It's like bigger level of management. So if you are going to get the role, you would not be talking about tiny things, because that's not what they care about. So understanding the job level is very, very important. Who will I be working with? The team. Sometimes you will see it in JD. Recently, we've seen that that's something that they say a lot. We're looking to hire an IT consultant to work with our team. We're looking for a senior business analyst to work in our team. So from your JD, more likely than not, I've seen like 70% of job descriptions these days come with this intro. We are looking for a manager to work with our customer service line. We're looking for an assistant manager to work in our business process. We're looking for the I've kind of exposed you to the team. So when you get into that interviews, you have to have an understanding that things you would say, examples you would give should be relevant to the team that you are going to. Remember, all they just want to do is find a round peg in the round hole, assuming all other conditions are stagnant. And when I mean all other conditions are stagnant, is beyond interviewing, there are other things that dictate if we get the job or not. Sometimes organizations are even testing their HR department by interviewing. So you know that that job doesn't even exist and they will just waste your time. Sometimes I know that I started a position and I still saw that job 4 months after starting the position. The job was still on the site. I could still apply. So just to pitch this in, that there's other factors that gets us the job beyond interviewing. So also be kind to yourself and don't always think that you are the one who is the problem. So imagine you had applied for that role that I started 4 months ago. Of course, you get a rejection letter. Thank you so much. You decided to go with somebody who has more relatable. The person has more relatable experience 4 months ago, and the person that started the job 4 months ago is not now. So sometimes too, there are other conditions that affect our getting the job. So, what is expected from someone on this role in terms of tool, documentations, knowledge, domain expert? We should be very aware of that. How is this role contributing to the organization? And this is a place of value, that you understand what you bring to the table. And only when you speak to what you bring to the table can the organization see the value in paying you money to come join them and deliver that things. So it's like but there was an example that I was giving that somebody wants to hire a bodyguard for their kid, and they're like big stars, and they are hiring a bodyguard who's also a driver to take the kids to school and bring them back. And they're interviewing and they're asking so many people, "Can you tell me your experience working as a bodyguard?" So the question is, why do these people need a bodyguard? Oh, they are like superstars. They own like $30 million homes. So of course, their children are prone to attack from people or people harassing them just because of the status that they have in the community, and people know how wealthy they are. So when I'm in that interview, I have the consciousness that that person needs me to have an understanding of who they are in the society and what kind of problem emanates from being in that shoe. So I'm saying, thank you so much for that position. As a bodyguard with over 10 years of experience working with high-end clients, I'm aware that kids of my high-end clients are subject to harassment from the public, or even basic disruptions like cameras and stuff. So with my experience, I ensure that these children are protected and they still have their children fund at the same time. And by doing this, I ensure that I'm on top of all the activities, ensuring that I have an understanding of the environment where they are, to ensure that nobody is intruding in their life. So again, that's a basic answer. If I had the JD and know the person, I'll probably refine it. But what I'm saying is that person understands that because they are high-end customers, these are the kind of problems they will face. So let's bring that back into an organization. If you are dealing with an organization that is just starting to grow, so it's a startup, they just entered the market, they have different kind of problems. If you interviewing with an organization that has been existing for 30 years, 35 years, they're probably the second in the country, they have different kind of problems. So when I'm interviewing, if I'm interviewing for a startup and they tell me, "Oh, Femi, how do you think you will help the organization?" I know that a startup wants to grow. They want to penetrate new markets. So when they ask me, I say, "Thank you so much for that question." As a senior business analyst with over 10 years of experience working with different organizations and helping new organizations to break into new markets, right? See where I'm coming from, because I have the level of understanding that this company is just starting. They need to break into a new market. That is what is important to them. That's why I'm able to say something relatable. And it's just natural that they find me as the best person because I'm basically saying what they need. So, but in the other way, it's an organization that is 30, 35 years. They are the second in the country in terms of their industry. So I'm saying, thank you so much. So as a senior business analyst that I had the opportunity to work in really large organizations, open organizations to maintain market relevance and become market leaders in the industry, I'm aware that as a business analyst, we have to align every project and deliverables to the organization goal. Right? Again, this is me understanding what this company is and what really makes sense to this company. If they're growing, they have different problems. If they're already grown, they're like trillions of dollars worth. They don't have that problem that a startup will have. But when I'm explaining, when I'm showing values of my position, I have the understanding of where that company is and what we should be concentrating on as an organization. And that's how we can show how we want to help the organization. Remember, they're not paying you because they like you. Like I always say, no company is interviewing you because they want to take you out of no job zone. They're not interviewing you because they want to give you money. They're interviewing you because of the value that you're bringing to them and how you will help them grow. So it's a transaction. Bring your expertise, help us, and we will give you this money in return. It's no, I say nobody likes you for giving you an interview. They want to fulfill an obligation. So have that mindset that we want to deliver value and not show some sentiment and so to say, who am I reporting to? It can also affect your work. Are you reporting to a line manager? Are you reporting to an AVP? So how does that affect you? The person you're reporting to will determine the kind of report you give to that person. So if you are reporting to a line manager, you probably will be reporting operational event, how you do this, how you do that. But if you're reporting to AVP, they don't care about the tiny details. It's more of high level overview, which we touched in the beginning, right? So who you are reporting to also informs you what you should concentrate on when you are giving answers. So if you are reporting to somebody who is like high up there, they don't really want to know how many minutes somebody spent or something, how many hours somebody says or something, but they want to see what is completed. How many projects was completed? How many projects has delays? What are the dependencies? Like no bigger problems. They don't care about the tiny problems. So we have to be aware of the person we're reporting to and what our report to that person will look like. So what makes sense to this person. So if I should meet this person once a month, what am I telling that person? So in an interview, I should show to that person that this is the kind of report that you will get, and it's something that I've been doing in the past. And this is my experience drafting this kind of report. And this is how I make sure that this report have its level of details that is beneficial to you. Remember, when that person takes your report, where I'm already thinking in my head, what do they need it for? They probably need to meet with the VPs, right? And they're setting the organization direction and making bigger decisions. So that person needs my own input to make them informed, so that when they get to that meeting, they look like the champion, even though they are not the one doing it. They are just taking our own feedback and taking it to the top to meet. But that person needs me to understand what they need that information for. And with that, I know the level of details I should be presenting that information to that person. And naturally, when you tell me, or when you come to that level of details in your interviewing, having an understanding of what I need you to do in collaboration with what I would do with what you give me, I just naturally want to employ you, because you know what I need this information for. You know why it's important to me. So definitely you know what to produce to me. And I don't need to teach you, like, this is what you should do, because you already have that overview. So in your answers, you want to be relatable. Okay. So what is the methodology used by the organization? And methodology, we mean, the working model, so to say. Um, might be some word of tech terminologies when we talk about agile. Maybe you've heard it a lot. They talk about agile environment, waterfall environment. It's like, how does this organization work? Because it's important that if we don't understand how the organization works, then we're not a fit for it. So in our world as business analysts and IT consultants, if an organization is working in agile, for people who don't know, agile is just new views about working in iterations. Iterations means in little increments. So basically, what Agile is saying is that you don't do all of the work. You do it like, you do small, you assess, you do small, you assess, you do small, you assess, that kind of thing. So if that's what the organization is doing, you want to show your experience in that environment, because they don't want to start to teach you how to do the job, rather than, like, they don't want to teach you how the environment looks like and start to teach you how to do the job. So they want somebody who can come in, at least has familiarity of the working model or the work environment. So they are not concentrating on that. They can actually show you what are the tools and how you will use them. So it's important to understand the methodology and even the industry. So why is industry important? The work in an NGO is different from a profit organization. So if you're interviewing for a government position, for example, the people in the top don't really care about profit, because they don't deal with it. They don't report profit. They report successful programs, successful initiatives, because the government finances them. So when we are interviewing for such roles, you don't want to start to pay so much attention and talk about, oh, I would ensure that the organization is profitable. I will ensure that we meet it, because that's not what they do. They don't keep those books. They don't keep a profit and loss account, so it doesn't make sense to them. Even though what you're saying makes sense in an outright view, but to those people it doesn't make any sense, because they're NGOs. They get money, they define initiative, they sponsor it. That's all. So if they sponsor some new immigrants, whatever, even if the immigrants don't end up being good immigrants, they don't care. They just want to know that this is the program, this is the funding, and then they carry it out. So what is of importance to those people? It's not the profit. And I'm sure at this point, it's being able to be heard, or having that good name, reputation. So when you see NGOs, it's more of reputation than profit. So ensuring that whatever program they organize, it fulfills the benefit in which the program was organized. So they are organizing a job fair for new immigrants, and it's being sponsored by the government of Canada, $100,000 sponsorship. So I am a business analyst who has been employed to determine what are the IT requirements to ensure that everything goes well. So when being interviewed there, I'm letting them understand that beyond me deciding technology, I have to be aware of what the goal of that campaign is, of what the goal of the initiative is, so that at the end of the day, those initiatives would be carried out perfectly. But I'm not talking about figures, because they don't really care. At the end, they're not going to say, "Oh, we spent 100,000. What did we lose? Did we waste any money?" Because the money is coming from somewhere. They might care in some little ways, but I can tell you that that's not what they pay attention to. But flip the switch. Let's go to a company that is being financed. They care about the profit. They care about how much they make. They care about the number of customers they have. So when I'm speaking, I have to speak with that mindset that this organization cares about the money they make. So I should care too. And I should show them that I understand how my work makes us more money, how my work gets us more customers, how my work makes us the market leader, because that is what is important to them. I don't see an NGO fighting to be a market leader. As long as they get the funding and they are rolling out their initiative, they are fine. But for companies, they want to be top there. They want their product to be the most sold. They want to have the highest number of customers. So that should be something that we have an awareness of. So when you are answering interview questions, you know the angle to pitch in from. You know the angle to. I used to say, what is the word? Um, there's a word that I want to remember. What is this word? What you call it, Seth? Okay, I will try to remember later. But what I always say to interviewer is that there's a punchline, right? A place where you can hit your interviewer to show that really, this is the person we should employ. This person understand what this organization is about and what is of value to that organization. So what position the company is in the related industry, we talked about that. Is it a startup? Is it a company that is, it's already the market leader? They're like what billions of dollars. So that should influence your answers, and you should understand what makes sense to such organizations in that level. And moving on, we have the different types of questions which you would get faced. You have basic information questions, resume questions, behavioral, situational, weakness questions, contribution question, and abstract questions. So I can't touch all of them, but I will talk with the basic information questions that are probably asking you how long were you in this company? How long were you in that company? These are very basic. You could answer your answers as short as you can. You don't need to talk so much story. Resume questions will be asking you based on your resume. Thank you so much, Sean. I see that you worked as an assistant manager in Burger King from 2019 to, can you tell me about that role? When you get asked these resume questions, please, please, again, it's not a time where you want to tell them story about that company. Understand that the only reason why they're asking you that question is to see how what you did there relates to what they want you to do here. So it's not an isolated question, right? And that's where a lot of people make the mistake. So you're so excited because truly you work there and you want to talk about all the brilliant things that happen in Burger King. No, it's the mixture of Burger King experience in relation to this job that I want to get right now. So when you're explaining, you're not just explaining what you did in Burger King, but you're finding a way of always relating the companies together. So let's say that job was in Burger King, it's customer facing. I was attendant, and I'm getting another job in a pub, a restaurant, right? General restaurant, maybe still just a pub with some pool and stuff. So I want to talk about my experience at Burger King vis-a-vis this. So they're asking me what are the experience. Thank you so much for that question. It was really an interesting time working in Burger King because as an attendant, I find it very fun working around people and understanding them and being able to provide the service based on the level of expectations that they want. With this experience, I think that I will be a really good candidate handling an environment like pub or the tennis. Now I'm trying to, like, I'm not just speaking about Burger King. I'm already trying to bring it back to their organization because even though they want to know what I did in Burger King, but they don't care. They were not the manager, they were not the owner. So they're not asking me to give an historical detail of my life. But it's like what you did there, how does it mirror to what you want to do here? And how how are you able to leverage on the happenings and your experience in Burger King to what you want to do in our pub right now? So when you're explaining this, do not isolate that Burger King because that's not what makes sense. They don't care about Burger King. If Burger King makes money, they don't care, but they care about the experiences that you have gathered there and how you will use that in their organization. So when you're explaining, be sure to create a fusion. Be sure to create that interrelationship of your experience with the expectation on the new role. So when you get asked this resume question, do not be sunk in explaining your fantastic work time in your previous employment. Find a way to bring it in relation to the job description and the expectation that you've been exposed to that the organization wants. So what did you do there that you think you will do here? What were the lessons that you learned there that will now be important in this position? That's what they care about. Okay. And we go to behavioral questions or situational questions where there are questions that test how you reacted, how you acted, how you behaved. I'm going to pause that because the next slide is really talking about behavioral questions in itself. And I will move to weakness questions. And I get that asked a lot that, oh, Femi, when they ask me what is my weakness, what should I be saying? And I say it's very simple. You use your positive weakness. Do not, do not concentrate on your negative weakness. And it's like, what do you mean by positive weakness? There are weakness that the organizations align to themselves that they care, but they like it. So what do you mean by that? That weakness that the organization pretend that they care, but they like it. They like workaholics. You hear, oh, in our companies, we want work-life balance. It's a lie. They want people who are ready to come hard 6 hours to their job and do it perfectly. Every organization will come out and say, oh, we want work-life balance. You should be able to attend to your family. But well, we want people to have rest and that. Of course, they say it outside, but they have not seen an hiring manager or a senior executive that will say, I'm not hiring this person because they work more. I'm not hiring this person because they like to invest more time on their work. I don't want to hire this person because this person puts too much effort to detail. So what would I say is my weakness? Or sometimes I do like this when people use me as a referral and they're calling me and say, oh, what would you say is that person's weakness? Okay. So I know this person is for somebody who pays attention to details. And because of that, I see sometimes that they're taking more time out of work time to ensure that their work is done properly, right? It sounds like a weakness that you're investing more time in your work, but the organization love it 100%. They love it 100%. They want you to do that, but they cannot come out on LinkedIn and say, hey, we are an organization that encourage our employees spending 16 hours for their 8 hour shift. And we really, no, they won't do that, right? They will tell you, and in that interview, you say, oh, so we actually pay attention to work-life balance, and we want to ensure that our employees are having enough rest, they're resting properly, they have time for their vacation. It's all lies, right? It's all lies. Nobody cares about us in its sense. And I'll tell you for a fact, I've worked with too many organizations. I mean, some have different programs to make you know feel okay, right, with different stuff. But at the end of the day, they want the job done. And if you need 5 more hours of your weekend to get the job done, they don't care. They want you to do it and get the job done. So you look for positive, negative, and not things. And also, for example, you don't say things that, oh, there was a time I made a mistake and it cost my previous organization about $300,000. No, why would you say that? Why would I give a job to a person who has cost the organization $300,000? And somebody might tell you that, oh, it's being honest. Interview itself is not an honest encounter. I can tell you for a fact. Interviewing is not an honest encounter because there's so many things you will modify. There's so many things you will paint good, even though they are not as good as they sound. So it's not an avenue for you to expose your worst of mistakes, because the truth is, hiring managers most times are not forgiving, and they're not forgiving not because they hate you, but they have the responsibility and they will take the ownership of when they employ you. If you make those kind of huge mistakes, even though nobody calls out their name, psychologically as human, oh, and I was the one who hired Femi. And now Femi has wasted $500,000 of organization money. Nobody might have, called them and say, hey, why did you hire this guy? This guy has screwed us. He's made us lost money. But just as humans, we want to ensure that whatever we do, when we make decisions, that we don't get to regret it. So when you expose yourself of having made huge mistakes that cost the organization tons of dollars, I'm scared. I don't want to hire you, even though you're a fantastic person. I love my conversation with you. You sound truthful. You sound like an amazing person. I have that fear beneath my heart. That what is the level of assurance that these mistakes will not repeat itself? And by that, I don't want to employ you because I don't want to get beaten for your mistakes. So when you are saying your weakness, be sure that you have processed it in your mind and you can agree with yourself. There are not mistakes that are not uh, easily corrected, right? Sometimes I talk about mistakes that happen on Monday, and then Wednesday I get myself back. So maybe sending an email to a wrong person or involving a wrong person in a conversation, and then I analyze it later and I found out that that was not the person, and I immediately, rescued it. Those are fine, but do not again expose yourself that you've made really huge mistakes. It's not the time to stand on the altar of truth and say, hey, this is me, this is who I am. That's not what you want to do there. Be very smart enough that you don't expose those things. Because as humans, different career progression, you might have made a huge mistake at some point in your life. It's just like, let's imagine that a footballer was having an interview and he says, can you tell me your weakness? One of my weaknesses is I get red cards every other game. So let's say they didn't have the record, and I'm telling them that as a footballer, I will get chased out of the the match. at every other point in time, because sometimes I might be too rough. Why would I hire you? So you'll be missing every other game because of your roughness, right? So if they didn't have any exposure to that, like maybe highlights or videos of what I've done, I don't want to concentrate on that. But now I know it's my weakness. It's something that I should work on, but it's not a moment in time where you want to expose yourself and be extremely vulnerable, because it doesn't get you the job. That's the truth. It's the pure truth. It might be sad when we look at it that, oh, I'm being honest and I'm telling the organization so that they know where I'm like falling short and they can understand how to help me. But most times they're not going to give you the job, and it's understandable. Nobody wants to, have a, what you call it, what is dynamite under their bed, and any small fire comes up, it blows up, right? And contribution questions that seeks to find out how you help your team, how you help the organization. Again, remember, it's very important to understand what is of value at every stage of the interview. So if they say, Femi, can you tell me, based on your experience, how you contribute to your team? The question is to the team. But okay, this team, is it the team working in customer service? Is it the team working in logistics? Is it the team working in marketing? Is it the team working in production? Right? Because what will be of value for those in marketing will not be of value for those in production. What will be of value to those in production will not be of value to those in HR, right? So when they ask me this sort of question, it has to be relatable to that team that I'm going to be working with. Like I said, if you search most of the JD, you will see we need an executive coordinator to work in our this team. There's usually the JD comes with the team that you will be working with, and that's what you should be concentrating on when you are answering the contribution questions. That what you're saying is of value to that team that you're going to be working with. An abstract questions that put us on nothing. It doesn't even speak about the JD. So this question is where I was in the beginning saying, when you get asked abstract questions, you have to be smart enough to bring it back to the relevant question. So somebody is asking me, can you tell me? I'm trying to think about something else. Some like usually questions that really that like you sometimes will even ask yourself, why are they asking me this question? Because it doesn't bother us on the JD, doesn't bother on the company. So when I'm answering that question, I will end my answer by bringing it back to the job description. Like, please, let's come back to the main discussion so that you don't derail this conversation, so that we don't get to spend the next 20, 25 minutes discussing things that is not relevant, right? But you can't tell the interviewer, say, please, can we talk about the important topic? You won't do that. But in your answer, you can be smart enough to roll back the conversation. What makes sense? Maybe let's look at it from this aspect. Um, I've not had really awkward abstract questions, but let's say you're having an interview as a manager and then somebody is now asking you, how do you undo situations of gender equality and all of these things? I know that if I spend too much time on this, it's going to lead me to totally different horizon, right? It's going to lead us to things that might not even pertain to what I would do on the job. So thank you so much for the question. As a manager in a company, based on my experience, I ensure that everybody is treated fairly and that people are respected for their decision. And for example, in my previous role, we ensure that we have recent frequent meetings to talk about equality and acceptance of other people's differences. And I believe that for an organization like this, I'm now bringing it back to the organization. And I believe for an organization like this, there will be sort of governance and procedures and things that the organization has set aside to ensure that people are treated fairly and equitably. And maybe these are questions that you might probably want to expose to me at the end of this interview on what the organization is doing. What I'm trying to do is I want to end that conversation because really it's not what I will be doing. It's just some subset of my role. But I don't want that conversation to go into 20, 30 minutes and it it's going to just derail us. And even might lead me to a place where I will be tense because I don't know what is right to them. I don't want to come across as offensive, but I don't want to spend time there. So I'm bringing it to them back that I believe that the organization has its procedures and rules around this thing, and they have their own ways of ensuring that people are respected. It's like me closing that conversation. Please, let's move on. Let's go to another thing. So if you get this after questions, you will answer it, but find a way of bringing back the conversation to what really matters respectfully, right? And intelligently. So that you don't spend time wondering 25 minutes, 30 minutes talking about things that are not really your deliverables. Because when you do, you get assessed on the main deliverables, and nobody's assessing you on equity and diversity, right? Or even if they assess it, it's probably a few points. And the rest of the question that should have been asked, you guys spent a lot of time talking about diversity and inclusion, and you've not actually been able to answer the right question. And the next person comes and answers all of the questions, get more ticks than you do, and then you don't get a job, right? It sounds unfair because you are not the one who dictates the question that I ask, but you have to have that awareness that it's your responsibility to ensure that the conversation always comes back to what is relatable, and you see that they are not derailing the conversation. So, like I said, we're going to be talking a lot about behavioral questions, questions that ask you to share a previous work-related experience and how you reacted. Like, what is your greatest achievement? How did you deal with a difficult stakeholder? Give me an example of a time you made a mistake. How did you manage the consequences? Tell me a situation where you took the initiative to fix a problem. Tell me about a time when you handled the challenging situation. These are the behavioral questions. Was there a time you were overwhelmed with work? How did you handle the situation? Right? And when we answer these questions, they are not linear questions that need linear answers. So you have to give context. And that's what brings us to the STAR method in answering these sort of questions, in answering your behavioral questions. And I would say most times I answer all questions using the STAR method. So what was the situation? What was your task? What was the action that you took? And what was the result? So situation simply means what happened. What was your task? In when it happened, based on your role, what were you supposed to do? Like, how did that situation influence your role? So, what was your task to do? And what action did you take? And then, what was the result? So, we say situation, we start explaining the setting of the story and giving interviewers some context to make it relatable. And then we talk about our task in what were your duties and responsibility. So, I was the assistant manager, I was the manager, I was the supervisor, because that will enable your interviewer to understand what really was your expectation in that problem and how did you carry it out. Did you go above and beyond, or did you do the barest minimum, right? Because your task on that situation determines it kind of helps to analyze what you did, and should you have done that? Was it within your scope, or you went above and beyond? And what was the action? So explain what you did. How did you react to it? And then the result, which is the most important thing, that your result has to be measurable. So they're asking me a question, Femi, can you tell me how you handle the difficult stakeholders as a business analyst? So I'm saying, thank you so much for that question. In my last role working with ABC Limited, we were developing a mobile application, and most of the stakeholders were not aligned with the functionalities of this application. And because of that, we were having delays in timeline. And as a senior business analyst in the role, I had to call a chat session, or I had to call a focus group session where we all had this discussion about the application functionalities, looking at what is of importance and what is most important, and dealing with the most important issue to ensure that we're able to roll this application out within the time. And based on this approach, we were able to complete the application within the right time and save the organization $300,000 in cost of delay if that application didn't launch. So my result has to be measurable. So I don't want to end it with and we were successful and everything was okay and the problem was solved and everybody was satisfied. It doesn't measure anything and it was okay. What was okay is usually a function of numbers or KPIs. So key performance indicators. The project finished in time. What does it mean to finish in time? No, it finished 23 days before schedule. Or we were able to save the organization $300,000 of project cost, right? Or we reduce the number of people who are supposed to do it by 10. Like, it has to be measurable so that it really makes sense, and when you're communicating it, it's relatable. So when you tell me that you did something for an organization and based on your approach, you saved the organization $300,000, I can, without asking for the question, I already see the value, right, of what you did. I don't need to ask you, but you tell me it was successful. Like, how did you measure the success? Was it money? Was it people? Who told you it was successful? Because you could say it was successful, and your senior manager says that was a flop. So we always end our situational questions with the result that has to be measurable. So depending on the context, if it's IT related, business, customer. So if it's like a customer support role and you want to show your result, you can say that the customer satisfaction report showed a 50% increase in the first quarter, or there was increase in customer retention. There was like 100% increase in customer retention. So from previously we had 20,000 customers who were like who were like renewed their subscription. When I managed the team, we had 42,000 customers who were renewing their, that's customer retention. So it was like 100% increase in customer retention because it's understandable, it's measurable. We can articulate it that this is what value you generated for the organization. So again, remember when you get asked this situation question, talk about the situation, which is you giving context in what happened, what was your task. Like mostly you talk about your position and what you were supposed to do, what action did you take, and then what was the result. This is the way where it makes sense. Remember, the person asking you doesn't know about that situation. So it needs to be a progression. And also beyond you even having the mindset of using the STAR method, your explanation should be progressive. And it's like telling a story. So for example, if I would ask you, Femi, can you tell me how you migrated to Canada? Oh, thank you so much for the question. So one day I was checking online, I saw that there was express entry in Canada, and then I bought my ticket. And after I bought my ticket, I took my IELTS. The person is looking at me like, so you bought your ticket to fly to Canada, then you did IELTS. Like, which one did you do first? But if I make my story and say, hey, I saw the application, I read the requirements, I saw that I needed to do an English test, I did the English test, I used these materials to learn, and I passed with 95% score. And after that, I submitted my application for express entry with a total point of 650. And then there was the application to apply, what is invitation to apply with a cutoff of 6:30, which means I got the invitation to apply. I submitted my application and relevant documents, and then I got the what do you call it? Passport request, and I submitted my passport and got my passport, and I booked my ticket, and I arrived in the what do you call it? YYZ, which is Toronto Pearson International Airport. And from there, I stayed in an hotel. And after that, I was searching online for accommodation. Fortunately, I got a place in downtown, and that was where I stayed until I got my first job. Like, it's a story, right? It's a progression. So when you're giving situation and explanation, you don't want to jump around. So you have, it should be a progression of events, because I don't know what happened. So when you're explaining, it should be relatable. Like, I should see, the build. Oh, was the problem. Like, you identify the problem, the situation, the problem. Oh, this was your task. Oh, nice. This was what you did. And sometimes you even want to show why you chose that approach, right? So I did this because of this, and this was the result. When you're giving these answers, it should be like a story with flow, not you start here, you come to the end, you go back to the middle, because you don't communicate when you do that. So when you give this walkthrough, it should be a flow, and it should be a really nice progression that when the person is listening, they don't need to troubleshoot their brain to understand what you're saying. It should just automatically flow like a story to them, right? So ensure that even though you know the STAR method, the way you present it and the way you articulate yourself should flow. It shouldn't be just, you're just talking amiss, and I can't really picture what exactly was the problem. What exactly did you even do there? Like, everything is just, together in one. I don't know. So I'm giving a scenario like, oh, how did you undo a situation whereby your project was going out of scope? Like, people didn't know what to do. Thank you so much for that question. I remember in this situation, at the end, we were able to save the organization 300 hours. So by doing that, like, now you started with the result, right? And then you now go back to the situation, and then you go back to what you did. It's so confusing. I can't relate. For me to understand you, I need to be processing it. And that's one thing I don't want the hiring manager to do. I don't need them to process what I'm saying. I need them to relate with it right away. It should make sense. They shouldn't have to be troubleshooting their brain to understand, oh, what does this guy even mean by this? So please ensure that when you're giving this situational analysis or situation walkthrough, it's a progression. It makes sense to even a toddler listening to you. They can see the flow of it, the situation, the task, the action, and what the result was. So, having said that, in conclusion, there are several things that also pertains to getting a job, having a really good interview. Prepare, be prepared, because like I say, you can't give what you don't have, right? So prepare as much as possible. It's what you know that you can give. Study the organization, study the interviewer, study the company, the industry, look at the JD, digress it, right? And sometimes prepare by calling the body of yours, have them ask you questions. Sometimes stand in the mirror if you are a loner, you don't have any friends, which is not a problem. Stand in front of the mirror, ask yourself the questions, answer it, record yourself, and listen to it again and see that if you were the one asking those questions, would you think that the person was answering it properly? So your demeanor, it it matters a lot. So you're going for an interview, be it online or one-on-one, your demeanor says a lot about you. Are you super anxious? Are you restless? The truth is, it's not easy, but you have to somehow find a way personally in what takes you out of nervousness. What takes me out of nervousness as a person is breaking the ice, talking about something totally unrelatable. Like I said, how is the weather, or oh, how long have you been in Canada, or something like that. Something totally off course. That's what breaks the ice for me. That's what makes me comfortable. So you have to find out yourself. Maybe yours is listening to music and dancing before your interview. It's up to you. Maybe yours is calling a friend of yours before the interview. It's up to you. But find that thing that you can do to put your heart at ease. It might be whatever, just because it's different to people. Because when you're not at ease, it's very difficult to do everything that I've been talking about. When you're not at ease, it's difficult to understand your interviewers. It's difficult to pay attention. It's difficult to, be able to articulate those tiny details because you yourself are not at peace. And rest, I cannot overhype what rest does. So sometimes people have interviews and they study through the night, and it's 10 o'clock, you sleep by 7, wake up at 8 because you have an interview by 10, and you come into the interview, you look like a Dracula, your face is swollen, you look like, you're so stressed inside out. And any little question that throws you off, you're done for the interview because your brain is all over the place, right? So rest as much as possible. Like I said, what's the worst thing that would happen? They won't give me the job. They're not going to kill me. So 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, whatever is the proper rest for you. Rest properly so that when you sit to talk, your mind is at peace, you're calm, and you're not stressed. Because the human mind works like a vehicle. And I used to give an illustration that for those of us who drive, don't try this at home. If you drive for an hour, if you have a robot, ask the robot to go open the engine oil lead in the car. It's gonna explode out there because it's been rolling, it's hot, it's warm. So, but if you waited 2 hours after that and you open, nothing happens. It's all calm, it's quiet. That's how human mind works. So you've been reading, you've been doing your background work and all of that. Take time to rest for your interview. So that way your mind is calm, and when it's calm, it processes things better. Reach out for help. I also cannot, you know, overhype this. You are not the god in everything. So I'm interviewing for a job in Deloitte. I would ask somebody who works in Deloitte. I would like to. I have an interview coming up in Deloitte. Can you please tell me some things about the organization? That would expose you to things that you should be saying in your interview, things that would make you more relatable to that organization. So they're telling me that, oh, in Deloitte, we don't set meetings after 2 p.m. on Fridays, which is true, by the way. So, and I go, why? Because it's like an unwritten rule that Friday after 2 o'clock, people are tired. They just want to go jump in their car and go to their, summer house and stuff. And also in Deloitte, we have what we call organizational governance, whereby if you do things, you have to check with this team, right? So they've given this person has given me a little breakdown of what is these like to work in Deloitte. Guess what? When I get to an interview, I am going to be pitching in all those things that I got in my explanation. So when they're telling me that, oh, Femi, how do you do your documentation? Thank you so much for that question. As a senior business analyst, I ensure that my documentations are done, and I ensure that I meet the organization standards, and I ensure that I am working with global teams who set organizations started to ensure that whatever I'm doing is conforming to the global standard of the organization. Why am I pitching that in? Because somebody has told me that that organization has a global standard that they adhere to in anything they do. So when I say that, it's more of like, oh, come on, like this guy knows exactly what he wants to come and do here. But I was only able to know that because I reached out to people who are there. And thank God for LinkedIn. You can pretty much write anybody. Of course, they would not everybody will reply to you, but if you're lucky enough, they will answer you. And again, make good use of your time, ask the right questions, and get the right information, which you will need when you do the interview. If you could get a mentor that is specific to your industry. Your mentor is probably somebody who is ahead of you in the curve. So they understand what the latest trend is, they understand what the latest technology is, they understand what the movement is in that industry, which you might not have exposures to. So they would be able to, articulate to you that, hey, getting into this role, this is what you should be concentrating on, and this is what you should be focusing on. So it helps a lot getting a mentor within your industry. And someone, if you call the person a mentor, I would assume it's somebody who has way more experience than you do and has gone through the journey that you're about to get into. And prep, have interview prep session by yourself, with a friend, whatever, from anybody. Have prep session because it really helps. What it does is you don't get to see some tiny details in the JD or in the stories of the application that somebody else will bring to you that, hey, based on my experience, I think they're asking for this. Based on my experience, I think this is what they need. And finally, the most important part of it, which a lot of people don't pay attention to, is believe in yourself. This is the part that nobody will do for you. Believe in yourself. Because when you don't, it shows off in your answers, it shows off in your demeanor, it shows off in everything that you do. And when you don't believe in yourself, you can't even grow. So one thing I see that happens is that when you take a JD, being honest with yourself, you know that I can only do 40% of this JD. So because of that, you get into the interview with a little bit of broken ego that, oh, what are you going to ask me? What if they ask me these things that I don't know? What if they go here? So you are in that state of doubt if you really can do these things. But guess what? You are not employed for one day. You are not employed for one task. So what do I mean by that? There is a learning curve. So when the organization employs you, you're not going to do everything they want you to do in one day. And more likely than not, your first 2 weeks, first 3 weeks is onboarding, showing you how it's done, what is done. So that means you have ample time to cover up for those gaps. So don't be extremely critical of yourself, assessing yourself on the capabilities at that moment. Remember, the company will be exposing you to a lot of things, which you will be able to learn from, and also maybe after work, read on, get more knowledge about it. So you most times will not be an expert in all of the job description. So believe in yourself that not only that you know at least enough to get started, but you're knowledgeable and hardworking enough to cover up the gaps when you get this job. So that mindset takes you into that interview and articulates your responses. There are two people interviewing. Oh, Femi, can you tell me why we should hire you? This person says, thanks so much. I'm an hardworking person, and I believe that I will be of value to the company. And you see what they're talking like somebody who just lost a job. They're talking like somebody who is rejected. They're somebody who is dejected. They want to sound hyper positive. Thank you so much for that question. I believe with all of the conversations that we just had, based on the different tasks and the projects that you say the team is working on, with my experience, I'm confident that I will get onto the job. I will hit the ground running. I will give value to the stakeholders. I will do this. I will do that. Like it's just the aura of your confidence, your self-belief. It pours out. It's like a wet cloth. You can like even when you cover it, you still feel it, right? It shows off on you. Like when you're confident, the way you answer the way you even articulate yourself, it shows all over you. And that's who we want to give the job. Even though that person will do the same thing or even do better than you, but they're scared in their own skin. So what gives me the level of confidence that I want to employ that person? Because I'm not seeing that confidence. And if that person is talking to me right now in an interview, what would they do when they meet our customers who are going to be nagging at them? What would they do when they meet senior executives who don't care about you, just want results? So you have to believe in yourself. And like I said, mostly unbelief comes from doubt on our capabilities. But remember, it's not a day job. You will not get to the job and do it and finish it on one Monday. You have years to be with them, months to be with them, depending on if it's a contract or full time. So there's a learning curve, and you will have your opportunity to learn things that you didn't know. So don't be too critical of yourself to see yourself as not being enough for that position, thereby killing your positivity. Okay. So, of course, there are other things that I might not have covered in this PowerPoint, but I not have covered in my explanation. But above all, continuous improvement is very key. So I don't have a job right now. I'm looking for a job. It's not the time to soliloquize. What are the skills I can pick on? What are the certifications I can do? What are the trainings I can do? And like I used to say, life is easier now than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, to get a managerial job, you needed maybe 10 years of experience. Right now, with a Udemy course and a few certifications, you might get a managerial course, managerial role. So life is easier now than it was years ago. And that is the truth. 20 years ago, if you didn't go to university, maybe nobody wants to make you a senior manager. But right now, nobody even cares what the education that you pass through is. It could be an online course, it could be a short boot camp. They don't care. They just want to see that truly you are going to perform well in this role based on how well you've portrayed yourself with your experience and how you answer the questions, and they feel confident to give you that role. So it means when you're waiting for this opportunity to come, it's not a time to sleep, it's not a time to soliloquize, it's not a time to be sad, it's the time to add more to your arsenal. And I can share you a bit of my experience when I moved to Canada, coming from Europe. It was a gray area. I started reaching out to people. Oh, what should I focus on? What should I be doing? At some point, I was doubting myself. This is something I know. I've done this all over, but coming to a new country, I was like, oh, will I be able to do it? Did they do it differently? Okay, I will go back to school. Again, you don't always have to. I had to go back to school. And at some point, I had to take jobs that I wouldn't have, taken primarily. But at some point, I had I reached out to a person who is Nigerian, and he gave me 2 hours mentoring. And trust me, that changed my whole perception. Prior to that, I did some interviews where it didn't just make sense. So I had this session with this guy, and he was asking me questions, and I was answering. It's like, bro, everything you're saying is the right thing, but you're not saying it rightly. Go back again. Tell me this answer again. And I said, no, 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 no. Go back again. So when we finished that, I was just like, okay, so everything I'm saying is right. It's just the way that I'm presenting it that is not sounding confident. And because of that, people don't, if you don't, like I said, if you don't believe yourself, nobody believes in you. And that changed my whole life. That when I'm articulating myself, when I'm speaking on my experience, I'm I'm a god in it. And that's how I should be. Like, who should know you more than you? With your level of confidence, articulation, and brilliance, you will pitch yourself. You should sell yourself. An interview is the moment where you sell yourself, and you don't sell yourself by selling it in doubt. You sell it with high level of confidence and portraying to the hiring manager or the employer, whoever he is, that I'm the main person. If you don't have me, you shouldn't have anybody else. And that's that kind of energy that you should take to the interview. Above all, like I said, there are different things that also determines if you get the job or not. So we could be super brilliant, we could be all of that. Remember, not all the jobs is also for you. So sometimes rejection comes from things that are outside of your control. I've had an interview with it was Real Estate Council of Ontario, RECO. It was for a senior BA role. The first interview went well, and then they go back to me and say, hey, we see that you're a real estate agent. For you to work as a business analyst here, you have to quit your license. I said, okay, no problem. But if I'm to quit my license, you have to pay me this amount of money, right? And then they went back and said that we cannot pay you. But they were honest enough to tell me that we cannot pay you what you're asking for, and we will decide to look for somebody who works in our company to help us do this project. So why I'm saying that is you could also get a no because they've just weighed the option that you really know what you're doing. And you asking for 120,000 or 100,000 or $90,000 a year is really worth it, but they can't afford you. So they are not giving you the job because they cannot afford you, but they won't write it there. Thank you so much, Femi. We are sorry that due to our financial constraints, we're unable to pay you that salary. No company will say that. They will tell you that we've decided to go with somebody who is more aligned with the role and experience, but they won't be honest with you. So just when you see this, it's not always about what you've done wrong. It's just that there are things beyond your control. So what we should do when we get rejection is take learnings from it. What could I have done better? And use this in your next interview. Do not kill your spirit and do not analyze yourself as being a failure, as being somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Just take the learnings, take what you can take from that, learn and improve when you get the next opportunity to pitch yourself. And I believe that doing all of these things is not a matter of will I get the job? It's about when would the job come. And it's something that I believe has worked for me as a person, has worked for other people, and I hope that you spending 2 hours with me today, you've learned a lot of things. So I could take the next few minutes. If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask me.
I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
My name actually is Vanessa, but the name is wrong. You mentioned that you asked a friend to enter to the LinkedIn profile. It's bad if it's a bad sign if I enter by myself. I thought it was like I'm showing interest in the person, so it could look good also.
Yes, and you're right. It could look good as well, but it's a gray area whereby you don't know what that person feels about it. So it's a situation that if I look at it myself, does it really matter if I looked at it with that person? It's very little importance. But when I ask somebody else to look at it, I am ensuring that one, that person doesn't see me as fishing on them or trying to get into their business, but I still have the level of detail. So it's kind of you don't know what the person's feeling will be about it. So it's like when you do it, The person would have whatever they feel about it. But if you don't do it, there is nothing to feel about it, right? But you have gotten the information that you need. So it's not a one way that, oh, when you look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, it means that is bad. No, but I just don't want to be in that situation where I don't know what the person thinks about it, right? I'd rather not have that be in that circumstance than being there and not knowing what the person feels about it, right? And also, it's sometimes a cultural thing. Like right here in maybe when I was in Europe, there are people are somehow very defensive. They don't like people getting beyond their work life. So, like your understanding of the culture where you are as well, like how are people open with people knowing about them, because their LinkedIn profile pretty much shows their past, like where they work, what they've done. So just understanding also where you are, the country, culture can also be a determining factor. So if I was in Europe, I would never let go and check somebody's LinkedIn, because people there, especially in the Scandinavian, so like Estonia, Finland, Sweden, people are more protective of their informations and details. I don't want to appear that I'm like, trying to know who they are beyond the fact that they are, the hiring manager for a position that I want to get into. So it's not a one-way traffic, but I just don't want to be in that place where I don't know what to feel. So it's better you don't know that I checked, right? So and I have the information that I need. So that's why I do that approach. But it depends. You could check and the person like, wow, so this person is looking at me. That's good. Remember also, when you look at it, them and they see that, oh, Diego checked my profile. I can check your profile too. So and God help you if your resume is different from your profile, or there's some details of what is there that is not on your. So you see, like there's a bit of exposure of yourself to some uncertainties, and that's what me I don't like. I don't like uncertainty. I want to prepare, knowing the facts and figures of what I'm going to deal with, and that's why I use that approach.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anybody who has any other question? Okay, so I did record it. I will find a way to extract the participant here, and I will see how I can send it to you as a file, or maybe I'll put it on YouTube and just drop the link from the name that I see here. And I hope, like I said, that this 2 hours plus really expose you to some things that you didn't know before. And I hope that you can leverage on this knowledge and take your career to the level that you want it to be. I wish everybody the best of luck, and I wish us all progress in our careers moving forward. And it's also good to connect with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Femi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Femi.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
Thank you.